Namaskar. I am Dr. Nalini Avinash Wagmare, working as an assistant professor at the Maharashtra Vidyapit Pune. This is my brief information. Today's our topic is related to Mughal administrative system or Delhi administrative system, or what we say in briefly nature of the medieval Indian state. So while we are studying the medieval Indian state in our syllabus, we have to only focus under that only briefly focus related to sultanate nature of sultanate state, Chola state, Vijayanagara state, Mughal and Maratha state. So very briefly, I am going to introduce you what was their nature of state and which were the characteristic. In this lecture, the 5 dynasties, briefly information about the nature of medieval Indian state. The nature of Chola state. First, we have to go to Chola state in the South India. That time, the kingdom was a very ancient one. Raja the Great, Rajendra I were the famous ruler of Chola kingdom. The Chola administration, king was the head of the administration. Public revenue was derived mainly from land collected in cash or in kind. The Chola king spent lot of money on public works. The Chola maintained big standing army and navy. The development of village autonomy was the most unique feature of this Chola administrative system. The Chola fleet crossed the Bay of Bengal to carry on trade with Burma, Ceylon, the island of Indian Ocean, and Malaya archipelago. The Chola developed the Dravidian style of art, Rajarajeshwara temple, Gangaikonda, Cholapuram, etc. Then Chola administration. The Cholas set up a highly efficient system of administration. The empire was divided into provinces called Mandalam. The number of provinces varied. Sometimes their number was 6 and sometimes their number was 8. Each mandala was divided into a number of districts called nadus. Within the jurisdiction of Nadu, there were many village town unions called Kuram and Tar Kuram, which were the units of administration. In Chola administration, the king was the head of the administration. The extent and resources of Chola empire added to his power and prestige. There was a lot of pomp and show. The Chola kings took up high-sounding titles glorifying their achievements. They maintained large imperial households. They gave big state banquets. They gave a lot of money as donation to temples. The Chola king started in practice of giving royal names to idols also. So that's why when we go to the South India and Tamil Nadu, Kerala and other places, we find there so many temples because royal rulers patronize those things. The images of Chola kings and queens were set up in the temples and were worshipped till today. The normal rule was hereditary succession to the throne, but sometimes the name was changed on account of seriousness of administration. The Chola kings had all the powers, but their absolutism was tempered both by a ministerial council and organized administrative staff. The heads of the departments were in close contact with the king and were often consulted by him. They were honored and encouraged by titles. The higher officials enjoyed the status of Peru Dharam and lower ones Siru Dharam. The head of the mandala, who was the viceroy, was either a close relation of king himself or a descendant of its disposed royal house. He was in constant communication with the central government. He received the orders of the king and also sent a report of what he himself to the king. He had a large number of officials under him in the work of administration. All records were properly kept by this. In Chola administrator, we find that one. The Chola kings spent a lot of money on public buildings. They maintained roads, bridges, and ferries. There was an extensive irrigation system. Dams were constructed to divert the water of rivers into small channels. Artificial reservoirs, tanks, and wells were used for irrigation purpose. The Cholas maintained a big standing army and a navy. The army consists of elephants, cavalry, and infantry. As many as 70 regiments are mentioned in the Chola inscriptions. The regiments possess a corporate organization, participated in civil life and made grants to temples. A lot of care was taken to give them training and discipline. The soldiers were kept in cantonments. The development of village autonomy was the most unique feature of Chola administrative system. The village and town assemblies were primarily assemblies and those of Nadus were representative of institutions. Then the nature of state of Sultanate. The state run by according to Quran. In Sultanate period, we have to find the slave dynasty, Khilji dynasty, Tughlaq dynasty, Sayyid dynasty, and Lodi dynasty. So what was the nature of their state formation, how it was run? So very briefly in this lecture, we have to study. State was run by according to Quran because most of the rulers are Muslims. So according to Quran, they have administered. There is no hereditary kingship. So in Hindus, what we find, if a ruler, his son become as a ruler. His prince became as a ruler later on after the death of father. Or before father death also, father declared he is his son. That is hereditary kingship. But in Muslim, there is no hereditary kingship. Takht or takat. Through show your takat, you can capture the takht means kingdom. So that was even elder brother, younger brother, middle brother, any brother or sister, they can also take the authorities in their hands, showing their qualities and strength and power. So that's why in nature of Sultanate administrative system or what we nature of state, we find that there is no hereditary. If any younger brother or elder brother or a sister also became as a ruler of that state. To help the king, other ministers also appointed. Military state form was there. We know that the monarchy system was there and military base we find the basically in Sultanate period. Then king is head of the state. He is the whole authority in his hand. Then the central government of the Sultanate period, autocracy of the sultans, military character of the government, religious influence over the government. Yes, we know that. Then again, the luxury of the Delhi sultans, they are live very royally and good condition of the capital. What we find. Then monarchy not hereditary, no loss of succession we find. Administrative machinery, the important place of amirs and nobles, the kingmakers we call, that is also existing in central government. Then provisional government, division of entire empire into many provinces. 23 provinces of Delhi Sultanate at its height, generally under the charge of the members of royal family or faithful nobles. Vast powers enjoyed by the governors. Provinces were the great source of trouble and revolts. Only very strong sultans were able to control the governors with the help of spies. Local administration, while we are finding, division of provinces further into units and subunits, paranganas, little interference from above, part played by the panchayats. Positions of all was important under sultans. They were narrow and intolerant towards non-Muslims. The position of Hindus were very miserable, despised and strange. They had to pay jizya to save their lives. That is a tax. The Hindu rulers or Hindu subjects who are under the Muslim rulers, these people pay tax to the rulers because they are not Muslims. Then administrative system of the Delhi Sultans. The administrative system of Delhi Sultan was based on Persian administrative system. So it was propagated that it was based on Islamic principles of Quran, Hadith and Shariat, etc. Main characters of administration in Sultanate period was it's starting from slave dynasty in 1206, lasted to the Lodi dynasty up to the 1526. The main feature of administrative system during this period were as follows below. Kingdom based on religions. The seed of Muslim kingdom in India was sown by Muhammad Ghori's inventions, Ghazni, Ghori. The chief aim of this invention besides plunder was the spread of Islam. The sultans of Delhi organized their government on the principles of Quran and Hadith and Shariat. And Persian model of administrative system they have adopted in India when they established their rule in India. Then they believed that divine rights of the king. The Sultan believed in the divine rights of the kings. The Sultan was regarded to be a representative of God on this earth. His word was therefore law and none could disobey him. According to Asarwadi law, the Sultan was Tsar and the Pope combined in one as he enjoyed both the powers. Means Sultan have whatever Sultan sing, that is the final one. There is no other law to restrict those things because divine power of the kings existing at that time. Then dutiful Sultan, the Sultan had the primary duty to serve his subjects. The welfare of the people was uppermost in the mind of the king under Delhi Sultanate. If they disregarded his duty towards his subjects, he was answerable before God and the people had the right to rebel against him. Then importance of religious ulemas. The Sultan was subordinate to Muslim law share, which he had to protect and enforce with no authority to alter it. The Sultan had to consult the ulemas. In every field of administration, the ulemas played an important role. Of course, there had been some despots like Balban and Alauddin, etc., who did not care for their advices. Lack of law of succession, we find one more things in Sultanate period. Under Muslim law, the position of Sultan was not hereditary. There were no laws of succession. The result was that there were always bloodshed, intrigues, slaughter at the time of occasion of the new Sultan to the throne of Delhi. Then use of national income at that time. The state revenue were regarded to be the private property of the ruler. They were free to use or misuse the revenue according to their sweet will. The government of Delhi Sultan was a theocracy. In theory, the sultans were the despotics of the Khalifa and were to rule according to the Islamic law based upon the precepts of the Quran. In practice, however, the sultan was an autocrat and his will was law. At times, the sultan paid ceremonial homage to the Khalifa, but such token alliances did not in any way affect his independence to spend money or to rule according to his will. The Sultan was an autocrat, another feature. The Islamic law no doubt served as a check upon their despotism, but there was no machinery to enforce the obedience of the sultans to Quranic injunctions. So Delhi sultans were despots. The influential position of the nobles, Sultan was the higher one. Then what was second is nobles. The influential position of nobles and amirs was a check upon the royal power, but its operation was fitful, being dependent upon the personality of the sultans. The weak and incompetent sultans were the puppets in the hands of the nobles, but there was no recognized system of constitutional law to set limits to the sultan authority. As such, powerful rulers like Balban Alauddin did whatever they liked, they not follow the nobles or khalifas. Then feudal government of the character we find in Delhi Sultan time. The organization of government was feudal in character. The provinces were mostly military fiefs entrusted to the charge of nobles. The Sultan's control over the distant provinces was not based upon any uniform principle of cohesion. It varied from nominal allegiance to complete subjection and depended to a great extent on the personality of the sultans. The monarchy was in fact a congeries of nearly independent states and not a homogeneous political entity. The descriptive tendencies of this feudal organization were very often at work, and usually length of sultan's word was the limit of his sway. Ikta system was a prevalent. Iqtidars were very powerful in Delhi Sultanate. And what was the function of the ruler at that time? The Sultan was the supreme head of the state and he carried on the government with the help of such officers as he might choose. He transacted a good deal of business in daily assemblies of his court, which was the center of political and social life of the empire. He was the chief lawgiver and the final court of appeal. His authority rested upon the army, and so he was the chief commander of the military forces. In short, he was a pilot of administration which depended for its efficiency on his personal supervision. He had a council of trusted advisors called Majlis-e-Khalwat, which he consulted on important occasions, but he was not bound to accept its decision. Nature of Mughal state. So in sultanates, we find that there is a theocracy. Sultan was the head, as well as according to Quran, they have the run the administration. Now we check the nature of the Mughal administration. Emperor was the head of the administration again. The Mughal government was a highly centralized autocracy. Department central administration was carried out by other officers also. Many ministers also appointed to run this administration system. Under that, Mir Bakshi, first of all, Wazir, Mir Bakshi, Khani Saman, Sadr us Sadr, Muftasib, Qazi, Diwani Biyat, Provisional Administrator, Subedar, Diwan, Fausdar, Sadr, Amil, Poddar, etc. The military organization, police organization, even finance administrative system, and the Islamic form of system existing in Mughal period also, other organization which help the ruler, the military and police administrative system. Then nature of state of the Mughal state was state run by according to Quran. The Muslim state was a theocracy according to religious also again. The state in medieval India was a military in character. The Muslim rulers had to maintain strong armies, but only to maintain law and order, but also to protect the people from foreign aggression. Whenever the foreigners' invasion took place, that time this Muslim ruler protected them. Divine origin of monarchy found here. The state did not care for the welfare of the people except Akbar. Most of the time, the ruler controlled the people. Akbar was a democratical liberal ruler of India at that time. Then the Mughal state. It is generally believed that the Mughal state was a theocracy. The history of the Mughal rulers, however, believes this assumption. In fact, the theocratic concept of the state had long been defunct. For not only was there no regular and ordained priesthood in Islam as in Christianity, the effective machinery in a theocratic state, but the Khalifa was neither powerful enough to extend his authority to the Indian Muslim government, nor were some of the rulers like Mubarak Khilji willing enough to acknowledge his sovereignty, which they showed by assuming the title of Khalifa themselves. By the time Babur planted his power on the soil of India, the Islamic state had already ceased to be a theocracy in India. Similarly, the idea that the king is only trustee, charged with the responsibility for safeguarding the interest of the state in the interest of the believers was also meaningless. The Mughals made the state their dynastic property. The sanctity attached to it as a trust vanished, except in the case of Akbar. The Mughal state then was a product of many factors and forces such as the Quranic law, the pronouncements of the jurists, the fusion of the Timur and Mongolian ethnic elements, the Sultanate legacy, the linguistic synthesis, the Persian ethics of royalty, the Arabic ideas and institutions, and also some new development of modern times such as discovery of New World by Spaniards leading to a great influx of silver and manufacture of artillery. It was thus constituted from a variety of sources, Indian, Trans-Indian. Rightly, Yaduna Sarkar remarked that it was characterized by Perso-Arabic system in Indian setting. The evaluation of the Mughal theory of kingship has been characterized by 5 streams of ideas. That is the theory of autocracy under Babur, the theory of divine inspiration under Humayun, the concept of divine origin under Akbar, the imposition of Hindu conviction of divine monarchy under Shah Jahan, and the restoration of the Islamic thought under Aurangzeb. From a mere Amir, Timur was descended the Pasha Babur, followed by Nairun Akbar, child of light, the Jagadishwara Shah Jahan, the Lord of Universe, and Jinda Pir Aurangzeb, living God. So these are the titles as well as rulers and their administrative kingship method mentioned in found in Mughal period. Then the Mughal king was the supreme head of the executive and the army. He was fountainhead of the justice also. To assist him, there were a number of imperial officers. The chief among them, Diwan, Mir Bakshi, Mir Saman, Sadaru Sadar, the Diwans, the prime minister, often known as Vizier. He exercised a general control over all the departments, although he was specially in charge of the revenue and finance. Then the Mughal administrator, the Mughal emperors did not accept the Khalifa as their overlord, enhanced the power and prestige of the emperor, tried to create such conditions as were conducive to the economic and cultural progress of their subjects, except Aurangzeb. None of them attempt to carry his administration on the principle of Islam. Akbar raised the structure to Mughal administration, which persists titled the reign of Akbar Aurangzeb with minor changes. The Mughal emperor was a complete despot and regarded himself the God's representative on earth, but each of the Mughal emperors worked hard for the welfare of his subjects. Thus, none of them proved himself as a cruel of selfish despot. Dr. Tara Chen described the Mughal rule as the rule of aristocracy, which means that in practice, the nobles and the ministers influenced the emperor in carrying out policies and administration. Though illegally, there was no limit to his powers. The following officers supported the emperor in carrying out the administration at the center. The Wazir or Diwan, who was the prime minister next to the emperor in the administration, supervised the entire administration in general, though his primary duty was to look after the finance of the state. Then the Mir Bakshi, who was not the commander-in-chief of the army, but looked after the recruitment, training, supplies, maintenance of hulia of the soldiers, branding of horses, etc. of the army. The chief Sardar, who next to the emperor on religious and charity matters. The chief Qazi, who next to the emperor was the highest judicial authority at the time. The Muftasib, who looked after the moral development of the subjects and saw that the Muslims observe Islamic laws. Khan is someone who looked after the personal necessities of the emperor and also managed his kharkhans. Mir A. Atish, who was in charge of the artillery. Daroga-e Dak Chowki, who was the head of the spy department. Among these officers, except Mir A. Atish, Daroga-e Dak Chowki, all were of the rank of ministers. The provisional governors, subedars, were officially transferred and their activities were reported to the emperor. The provisional Diwan, finance minister, were responsible not to subedar but to wazir at the center. Thus, the center kept the provinces successfully under its control. Then provisional administration, again we find that the provisional empire was divided into subas and the head of the administration of Suba was called the Subedar. The provisional administration was a duplicate copy of the center. Akbar kept a balance of power between the Subedar and Diwan of the provinces who work under the supervision of the Wazir at the center, thereby minimizing the possibility of revolt by any of them. The following constitutes important high official provincial Subedar, who was the head of the provincial administration and was assigned a high mansab and a big jagir, maintained a big army and supervised the function of all provinces, officers of the provinces except that of the Diwan. Diwan, who was the finance minister of the provinces and functioned under the Wazir at the center. Bakshi, who looked after the army organization of the provinces. Again, the Wasia Navis, he head of the spy department. Kotwal was a military big city of province looked after by this governor. Then the post of Sadar Qazi. So Fauzdar, who was military officer of maintain peace and order. Amala Guzar, who was a finance district level. Bitikchi, who helped the Amal Guzar in the preparing words. So here the Karkuns, who were clerks and prepared the reports of paper concerning revenue. The last unit of administration was the village, which was self-governing unit, looked after by the hereditary officer like Chaukidar, Patwari, and the village panchayats. So that was the Mughal administration, central, provinces, and village level. Briefly, we see the Maratha state of administration also. Shivaji was the supreme head of this government with all powers, executive, legislative, military, as well as judicial concentrated in his hands. A council of 8 ministers assist him in the Maratha central administration. We call them as a Ashtapradhana system. The minister received new sanctuarized titles and their functions were purely advisory. These 8 ministers were the Peshwa, the Prime Minister, whose duty was to look after the general welfare and interest of the state. Amatya, Finance Minister, who was in charge of checking and countersigning of all public accounts of the kingdom and other areas under its purview. Then Mantri, the state chronicle, who maintained a daily account of the king and his court. He was also known as a Vakir Navis. The Sumanta or Bir was the foreign secretary whose duty was to advise the king on external affairs, war and peace. Then Sumanta Dabir was the foreign secretary whose duty was to advise the king on external affairs, war and peace affairs on the state. Then Sachiv, home minister whose duty was to look after the correspondence of the king. He also checked the account of the Paranganas. Then Pandit Rao, his duty is to fix religious functions. Nyayadesh he, was responsible for defending civil and military justice. Then Senapati was commander-in-chief in charge of recruitment, organization, discipline in the army. He was also responsible for arranging and deploying troops in the battlefield. Then Maratha Confederacy was also existing in the Maratha period. Bhosle of Nagpur, Sindhi of Gwalior, Holkar of Indore, Gaikwad of Baroda, Peshwa of Pune controlled the administration after the Shivaji period in Maharashtra. Then silent features of Vijayanagara period also we check. The rulers of Vijayanagara Empire were able to set up very efficient system of administration. The king minister, the court, provincial government, sources of income, justice, army, art, literature. These all subjects by ruler. Given the importance to all language people and all religious persons, the Vijayanagara Empire was a very rich one. The king of the Vijayanagara Empire was a fountainhead of all power, executive, religious, judiciary, administrative. Then administrative unities are there. Those the entire Vijayanagara Empire was divided into provinces known as Rajas and Mandalas. There were 2 classes of provinces, those which were directly administered by the emperor through his representative, who were generally the members of the royal family, and those that were ruled by the feudatories known as Nayakas or Samantas. The degree of autonomy enjoyed by the Nayakas varied from one Nayaka to another. The Raja was further divided into Vishas, Venta, also known as Kottam in Tamil Nadu. This was further divided into Naidu, Sima, and that in turn into Kampana Sthala. The large administrative unit consists of a group of villages. The village and town assemblies, which had existed from long, continued to look after local affairs, whether social, economic, administrative, or judicial. So these are the, in briefly, I have explained the related to Delhi Sultan Shahi, Mughals, Cholas, Marathas, and Vijayanagaras. Administrative system, their nature of state, their kingship, and their, how king was the head of the state, and some other minister appointed there. The administrative is central, provincial, and village level is found in every dynasties. So very briefly here, today also if you check the government, similar points, central government, state government, then village government, then rural area also we find. So that only the monarchy was there, now the democracy is there. Some changes we find because of transaction from period to period. So every rulers, their administrative, their nature, actually that time the religious theocracy was main in the Mughal and Delhi Sultan Shahi. There was no hereditary kingship, but in Hindu rulers concept of Chola or we take Vijayanagara, that time hereditary kingship we find. So this is the information about nature of state of the Mughal, nature of state of the medieval period, generally in these dynasties. Very briefly, I have explained. For more detail, you have to read these books. In Shastri studies in Chola history and administration, even history of South India by Shastri, Nilakant Shastri. Then essence and administrative system of the Marathas. SPC and Sources of History of India, Stewart Gordon, Marathas and State Formation, then Satish Chandra book, Medieval India, V.D. Mahajan book, Medieval India, R.C. Mahajan book also you can refer for more detail related to this topic. Thank you very much. Thank you.